For a while now I wanted to make a video about the virtues of slowing down and using imperfect gear. It took a while to find the time, but last week I did such a shoot and I shot some behind the scenes video. In the past 6 months or more, I've been often immersed in new cameras and lenses that bring us more options, faster shooting and better image quality. I love technology that makes my life as a photographer easier, but in my opinion, that technology doesn't come without its downsides. For starters, let's talk about predictability. The better the technology, the more predictable the results will be. The chances to get accidents have become very small. However, happy accidents are often learning moments and sometimes even defining moments for a photographer's vision. Technology also tends to make me lazy. It's never a good thing for the tools to be in charge of the artist. And then there's the risk that the technology makes me go too fast. Sure, I rely on efficiency to make a living, but art can't be too efficient. And last but not least, technology is often focused on perfection. But perfection by which standards? Who decided that pin sharp is perfect? Why do you need to retain detail in the highlights and shadows? Those are all arbitrary things. So I encourage you to make your own set of standards. Therefore, there will be always a place in my camera bag for slower cameras and lenses with outdated optical formulas and weird coatings. Let's quickly go over the gear that I chose for this shoot. The camera I went for is the GFX50R. It's a bit of a slow, outdated, slightly weird medium format camera, but that's exactly why I love it. It still has that fantastic big sensor with a ton of dynamic range, and you can stick some cool manual lenses in front of it. My main lens for this camera is the Mitakon 65mm f1.4. It's a really heavy piece of glass and metal, but it's relatively affordable, lets in a lot of light and it renders really nice. I also have two vintage Minolta Rokkor lenses that I use with a Kipon adapter on the GFX. The 58mm f1.4 I bought for €50 on eBay. It's not in the best shape, it's soft and it vignettes, but it has a lot of character. The other Minolta is the 85 f1.7. That one is in a much better state and I paid a lot more for it. But it's also optically better, but I haven't shot with it much yet. Now, none of these three lenses come even close to the quality of the native GF lenses, but this shoot was not about sharpness, micro contrast and accurate colors. I've never been much of a tripod fan, but in the last few years I've learned that a tripod can open up so much extra possibilities and it can help you to slow down. This is one from Sirui. It's nothing fancy, but it's affordable, stable, durable and pretty light. The only thing that I don't like about it is that there's too much friction if you want to change the height of the center column. As I knew we would be shooting after dark, I needed to bring some lighting gear as well. The plan was to keep it very simple with just two small LCD panels to complement whatever ambient light we could get. But I also threw in some extra lighting gear in the back of my car just in case. The Godox SL60 is a powerful yet affordable LED light, and in combination with a very practical Phottix 105cm softbox, it can save the day. And so it did. I could have brought a small speedlight kit instead and have less to carry and more power. But for this shoot I wanted to work with continuous light only, as I love slow shutter speed. But that's for later in the video. As I often do for shoots like this, I put a little post on Facebook that I was looking for a subject for a shoot, and I received a couple of reactions. After careful consideration, I went for Suzanne. I photographed her 15 years ago. 15 years! I'm definitely getting old, and judging by her Facebook picture, Suzanne doesn't. Life isn't fair. I knew we would be shooting after dark and the weather was horrible, so we had to find an indoor location. Another requirement for these kind of intimate portrait shoots is to have some privacy, and I'm terrible in deciding on locations. But luckily Suzanne took charge and booked a nice hotel room. As a hotel room it was great, but as a shooting location it had its challenges. Brick walls and ceilings may be cool, but you can about slide on them, and the lighting in the room didn't offer many flattering options either. But challenges are there to kick you out of your comfort zone, and that's a good thing. The hardest part of every shoot to me is to just get started. There's a lot of pressure because that first setup, that first picture will probably not be anything special, and still it's always the most important setup of the whole shoot. The first setup doesn't need to produce portfolio material, but you just can't screw it up. It's at this point that you quickly have to establish trust between you and the model. And the best way to do that is to show that you're a nice human being and a competent photographer. I'm nervous before every shoot, and chances are my subject will be nervous as well. Over the years, my nervousness hasn't gotten any better, but I got a lot better at pretending I'm confident and competent. Whenever possible, I use ambient light for my first setup to keep things simple. But there just wasn't any easy flattering light in the room. So the safest bet was to construct the light myself. I knew the Godox SL60 in combination with the 105cm Phottix softbox would give me easy flattering light. I added the fabric grid to the softbox to prevent light from spilling onto the background. I then set Suzanne on the corner of the bed and placed the light so that it created a Rembrandt light that would be flattering yet offer her a range of movement. I found the background a bit dark, so I added one of my small LED panels to create some balance and separation. Being a photographer doesn't mean you have to be behind your camera all the time. It's tempting to hide behind that black box, but I force myself to keep the camera down most of the time. I'm a human being with another human being in front of me, and I don't want the camera to be a barrier between us. It is a constant balancing act to juggle the photography side with the human side, but at the start of the shoot my main concern is not the picture. It's all about setting my subject and myself at ease. Take all the time you need, don't feel pressured to move faster, and before moving on to another setup, try some different angles. Often your setup will also work from a different angle, sometimes it's even better. After an outfit change, I made use of the only piece of white wall available and bounced my light into that wall. Because I spent a lot of time establishing trust during the first setup, I earned the right to be more experimental. At this point, I can afford screwing up a shot, and that's exactly the position I want to be in. It's only when you're not afraid to fail that you can be truly creative. I set my camera on the tripod and set the shutter speed at 1/4 of a second. It's surprisingly easy to get perfectly sharp pictures at such a slow shutter speed with a static subject. But what I'm really interested in is to experiment with different directions and speed of movement. Movement evokes emotion and makes people come alive in the picture. It's also worth it to experiment with very subtle and slow movements. The overall picture will still look pretty sharp, but that little bit of movement takes the sharp edges off, smooths out the skin and prevents stiff expressions. Even when the ambient light levels are very low and seem not suited for portrait photography, I usually have a go at it anyway. The two bedside lamps provided most of the light in the room, and there's a little bit of fill coming from the light by the television. I prefer working close to my subject, but you can't always get close from the start. I always like to get inside the personal space of my subject. It's not a tricky thing, you just have to work towards it, earn it and get the timing right. And by this time I felt like I could come in closer and I mounted the Minolta 58mm on my camera. I shot these between ISO 1600 and 3200 with the Minolta between wide open and f2. My shutter speed was at 1/60. Manual focus with fast lenses on a medium format camera and your subject so close can seem very difficult at first, but with enough experience and practice it becomes second nature. And if you don't have to think about the technique anymore, you'll have more brain power and energy left to interact with your subject. So far we did only dark and moody pictures, so I wanted to create something a bit brighter and I stuck with bouncing the light on the white wall. Bouncing light is less controlled and precise than using a softbox, but by bouncing light and letting the light marinate inside the space, the light also often looks less sterile, more natural. As photographers, we often work really hard to get the light and the poses right, but the expression of our subject is often overlooked. You can't just say smile, look intense, or give me your happy face. Coaching the expressions of your subject is all about the kind of conversation, the tone of your voice, and your own body language. If you want to capture a certain mood, it's up to you to create that mood. I like the warm glow of the bedside lamps, but I couldn't really move them and they weren't very powerful. So I used them as a starting point to create a similar but more controlled and brighter setup with my two Godox M1 RGB panels. I matched the color temperature to the bedside lamps and then I started playing around. There's no standard procedures to set up this kind of lighting scenario. It's all about experimenting, changing angles, position and intensity until you get it right. Don't rush it, just keep perfecting the setup until it is just right. I tried playing with a mirror in the frame, but eventually I settled for the bench along the wall. It's important to stick with it for a while as soon as you feel like you have something. Take it step by step and don't move on to the next step until you have the current one perfected. Here I started with the lighting until it was just right, and only then I moved on to the pose. And after that was fine-tuned, I focused on getting the right expression. And finally, I'm making some variations in crop, composition and distance. We started in the corner and although it looked okay, I missed some depth and separation. So I moved Suzanne and the lights a couple of meters away from the wall and then repeated the whole step-by-step process. Don't be afraid to take a little break from time to time. Even if it's only a minute or two, it resets the energy levels. By this time we were approaching midnight and we both felt pretty tired. But Suzanne had one outfit left. I already knew that I had exhausted the possibilities of the room and my own energy levels. But we gave it a go anyway. I don't think we made any good pictures in this last setup, but I still wanted to include it in this video. Because I've seen a lot of young photographers who seem to think that experienced pros only make great pictures. Well, we don't. And you shouldn't be discouraged when you hit the wall at a certain point. We all do. It's completely normal to run out of ideas and energy. It quickly became clear that it was time to wrap up the shoot. And with that, it's time to wrap up this video as well. Allow me to recap the main points I wanted to make in this video. Speed isn't always what you need. It can be greatly beneficial to slow down and take your time. To get your foot off the gas, you might try to use a slower camera, manual lenses, and maybe a tripod. But don't invest all your time in gear and settings. The whole point of slow portraits is to invest time in your subject. If you want your subject to be open, you'll need to be open yourself as well. Build a relation with your subject slowly. Start safe, but don't get stuck in the safe zone. As long as you are respectful, take risks if you want great results. And the most important thing, this is more than just photography. A slow shoot is your chance to learn something about someone you might have never met without your camera. If you do a good job, those pictures might mean more to your subject than you think. One more thing. I'll be starting an email newsletter soon. So if you want to get some more tips, images and announcement of new videos and workshops, head over to my website and subscribe. I hope this was interesting. See you in the next one or in my newsletter.